want to make a deal, obviously. Right now, they're not doing business with us. You know, people talk about going cold turkey with China, meaning just forget about it. We were losing hundreds of billions of dollars a year with China, and now they're not doing any business with us.
Welcome to the tipping point in global trade, a moment so critical it could redefine the economic future of the United States. For decades, America was the beating heart of global consumption, with Chinese containers flooding its ports like clockwork. But now, the tides have shifted. There's no way the U.S. can recoup the container imports it's lost from China. And that's not just a headline, it's a wake-up call. But don't panic, this isn't the end. For sharp investors and forward-looking strategists, it's the beginning. The truth is, this disruption is creating unprecedented openings in supply chains, manufacturing, and nearshoring, and those paying attention are already positioning for explosive gains. From Mexico to Southeast Asia, and even within U.S. borders, a new trade dynamic is rising from the ashes of dependency on China. This is the time to stop looking backward and start leaning into the new industrial revolution. Before we dive in, kindly take a second to hit the like button. It really helps to support and to grow my channel and keeps us bringing you the latest market insights. Thank you. We're talking about reshoring booms, infrastructure megaprojects, port overhauls, and the rise of alternative trade routes that are rewriting the rules. Yes, the old model is dead. But in its place is a leaner, faster, more resilient trade ecosystem, and you have a front-row seat. This isn't just economics, it's geopolitics, strategy, and wealth creation at a global scale. We're diving into why the U.S. can't get those containers back, and how that could be the most bullish news long-term investors have heard in years. While much of the spotlight has been on the sharp drop in container traffic from China to the U.S., especially since the tariff battles began under President Trump, the real story runs even deeper. If you look closer at the kinds of goods coming in and how much of the total volume China used to dominate, the picture becomes even more alarming. It's not just fewer containers, it's a fundamental shift in trade dynamics. From electronics to furniture, machinery to clothing, entire categories that once relied almost entirely on Chinese supply lines are now drying up at American ports. The numbers aren't just dipping, they're falling off a cliff. And this isn't just a short-term reaction. It's part of a longer-term decoupling that could reshape where, how, and with whom America does business for decades to come. That means new winners, new trade routes, and massive opportunities, but only for those who see what's happening before the dust settles. Let's break down just how deep China's footprint used to run in America's ports and why its sharp decline is turning heads. In 2024, U.S. ports were still heavily reliant on Chinese imports, but the dominance was already starting to wobble. The Port of Los Angeles topped the charts, handling over 22 million metric tons of containerized cargo from China. That was more than half of all the cargo it moved globally that year. Let that sink in. One country made up over 50% of the activity at America's busiest port. Next door at the Port of Long Beach, the story was similar. Of the nearly 14 million tons of goods processed there, more than 8 million came directly from China. That's over 60% of the total. These aren't small margins. These are heavy strategic volumes. Meanwhile, on the East Coast, the port of Newark in New Jersey took the third spot, moving about 7.5 million tons from China. That made up nearly a quarter of its total cargo traffic. A significant slice for a single trade partner. What does this tell us? The U.S. supply chain wasn't just connected to China, it was tethered to it. Losing even a fraction of that traffic isn't just inconvenient, it's transformational. And it opens the door to entirely new trade relationships and regional supply hubs. This data reveals the scale of the gap left behind and how urgent the race is to fill it. For investors, entrepreneurs, and policymakers, it's not just about watching ships come and go. It's about rethinking where the next economic wave will come from. And it wasn't just the big-name ports in California or New Jersey. China had a firm grip on nearly every major U.S. gateway. In 2024, nearly half of all container cargo moving through Tacoma, Washington, came from China. Oakland and Seattle weren't far behind, with about 37% and 36% of their volume tied to Chinese trade. Even on the East Coast, ports like Charleston, South Carolina, and Norfolk, Virginia were significantly tied in, with 21% and 18% of their imports coming from China. But here's where it gets even more eye-opening: the kinds of products America was relying on. According to trade data, China wasn't just one of many suppliers, it was the dominant force across entire industries. We're talking nearly half of all imports of plastic goods like toys, household products, and personal care items. Nearly the same goes for furniture, electronics, and even nuclear reactor parts. Shocked? There's more. Steel products, sports gear, and toys from China still made up as much as 88% of all imports in their categories. Even in smaller categories, China's grip was undeniable. Over 60% of bed sheets and pillowcases, 40% of bikes, motorcycles and tractors, and nearly a quarter of all printer paper and packaging materials still came from Chinese factories. But as this dependence becomes a liability, companies are scrambling to diversify their supply chains. Many are already moving production to countries like Vietnam, Thailand, India, Malaysia, and Indonesia. With talks of returning tariffs and rising geopolitical tension, firms aren't waiting. They're racing to pivot before the next trade shock hits. As experts like Michigan State's Jason Miller point out, there's a narrow window to act before tariffs kick back in, and smart companies are using this moment to redraw their entire sourcing strategy. This isn't just a shift, it's a supply chain revolution. Here's the hard truth. The U.S. simply can't replace the sheer volume of goods it used to get from China, not even close. According to supply chain expert Jason Miller, we're talking about a 30% to 60% drop in imports from China. And there's just no way that countries like Vietnam or India can fill that gap fast enough. And the impact isn't just on trade stats, it's already hitting American workers. Fewer imports mean fewer trucks on the road. Fewer containers mean fewer warehouse shifts. And all of that trickles down from port workers to forklift drivers to the local coffee shops and diners that rely on their business. Ports that once buzzed with activity are starting to quiet down. This isn't just a trade issue, it's a local economy issue. If you live near one of these major ports, you're already feeling the slowdown in ways that go far beyond cargo. And unless something changes quickly, specifically the 145% tariffs on Chinese goods, the slowdown could get worse, fast. If you're enjoying and finding this helpful, please take a moment to like this video and share it with your friends. Miller warns that unless those tariffs are lifted immediately, like this week, it's hard to see a way around this downward spiral. We're at a crossroads. Tariffs were meant to level the playing field, but they've created a shockwave that's now hitting U.S. shores hard. Businesses are bracing, workers are waiting, and policymakers are under pressure to choose, hold the line or pivot before the damage deepens. This isn't just about China anymore. It's about how the U.S. rebuilds its role in the global supply chain and how fast it can adapt. Meanwhile, back in China, the signals are getting harder to read. Some U.S. logistics executives working on the ground there say they've seen factories springing back to life and not just for any brands. Word is that giants like Walmart and Target have quietly greenlit production to resume. But here's the twist. While factories are back to work, those same retailers haven't restarted their usual product inspections before shipping. That raises questions. Are they rushing to restock in anticipation of a tariff rollback? Or are they hedging their bets, trying to stay ahead of any coming changes out of Washington? This flurry of activity came right after top retail leaders were reportedly seen visiting the White House. Shortly after, Trump made headlines suggesting that tariffs on Chinese goods could be coming down. That alone would explain why the order pipelines are suddenly moving again. These companies may be prepping for a trade thaw. But there's still a lot of uncertainty. Will the tariff cuts apply across the board, or just to the big players with deep political ties and massive supply chains? If Walmart and Target get special treatment while smaller importers still face steep duties, it could further shake up competition across the retail sector. This moment is full of contradictions, factories gearing up, inspections on pause, White House whispers, and supply chains holding their breath. It's a sign of how closely connected trade, politics, and business decisions have become. Investors, importers, and consumers alike are watching this drama unfold in real time, and whoever reads the signals correctly could be the first to act on what comes next. So, what does all of this mean for the bigger picture? We're watching a global power shift in real time, and it's not just about containers or ports. It's about where America sources its goods, how prices at the checkout line are affected, and where the next big investment waves are forming. With supply chains in flux and trade policies on a knife's edge, opportunities are emerging for companies ready to adapt and investors ready to move. Expect volatility in the short term, yes, but also expect major long-term growth in areas like nearshoring, automation, logistics infrastructure, and emerging market manufacturing. This is how new trade empires are born, not overnight, but during moments of disruption like this one. And remember, the decisions being made in boardrooms, ports, and Washington right now will shape the next decade of global commerce. If you're an investor, a business owner, or just someone who wants to stay ahead of the curve, now's the time to pay attention. The U.S. may not be able to recoup the container traffic lost from China, but that loss is opening new doors, new markets, and new chances to lead. If you found this breakdown helpful, hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to understand what's happening, and subscribe for more no-fluff insights on global trade, policy shifts, and market trends. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.